All right, let's get started. Good morning. Welcome to today's Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association webinar, the last in our LA Live series, which ran every day this week. Today our webinar starts with Roger Phillips, Chair of the LGPS Advisory Board, who will be launching the scheme's annual report. Then we'll be joined by Rachel Brothwood, who is the Director of Pensions at the West Midlands Pension Fund and the newly appointed practitioner representative on the Scheme Advisory Board. Rachel is joining us today to answer as many practitioner questions as possible. The annual report will be available on the Scheme Advisory Board site this morning, and we'll also have a link for you. My name is Rachel Pine, and I look after content for the PLSA's conference and training offerings. Well, you've heard from me all week, so today I'm handing over the chairing of the session to my colleague, Joe Dabrowski, who is Head of Defined Benefit, LGPS, and Standards at the PLSA. I'll see you at the end. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks very much, Rachel, and welcome everybody. Very nice to meet you in this format. It feels like the year has gone incredibly fast since we were last in the Cotswolds, and I thought that was eventful with the Extinction Rebellion protesters and everything else, and yet again another May passes and more events overtake us. But delighted we've been able to kind of connect with you this week. We covered lots of really important topics that we've been talking about with our local authority committee and members over the past several months, including COVID, employer health, ESG issues, admin, and today the work of the Scheme Advisory Board, including the annual reports. So without too much further ado, I'm going to hand over to Roger to walk us through the annual report and give us an update on the work of the Scheme Advisory Board. We've got lots of time for questions, so please do make sure you get those through on the Q&A bot, and we'll pick up those in due course. Many thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Hope everybody can hear me. Good morning and Bore da to everybody. Yes, it's very windy here in Herefordshire as well. As Joe said, 400 of us all together in one room last year. My word, we're all in different places this year. Not least, of course, the gentleman who spoke before me last year, which was Rishi Sunak. He's very much also in a very different place to where we were. What I want to do today is just to update you on some of the things that the Scheme Advisory Board have been doing with the result of COVID, and to touch on our work plan. Also to formally press the button, and I can tell you that the annual report has gone, the 7th annual report has gone live now on our website. But before I do that, can I just begin by saying a very special thank you to all of you for the work that you're doing under these extraordinary circumstances. As we'll touch on, the surveys have shown, you know, that the pension scheme and the delivery of pensions is an essential piece of work. And as a result of that, you know, we can say with confidence that that is being delivered. And I thank you all for doing that, because I think that's a very important piece of evidence that we need for the integrity of the scheme in the future as well. So I think the message today very much is about reassurance to our members, to our employers, and to the wider media as well about the scheme. We are, of course, living through a very, very different time to what we were when this annual report, of course, was summarizes, which of course is March 2019. But to begin with, let me just say, I hope all of you are regular attendees of our and join our website. You will see there some information, clarification that we have got, particularly as a result of the COVID issue. We have got a page on most frequently answered questions, websites for employers, for members. We've written various letters to chairs, advice, and I think that's all a very important source of information for you all. Also on coordination activities, I'm delighted that Rachel is joining us, because Rachel, who of course is now the practitioner representative on the board, has also been chairing a group that's been picking up some of the issues and sharing some best practice. And I know that Rachel will be able to share with us some of the work that they have been doing. And where there are some bigger issues than probably can just be dealt with in that group, we escalate those up to the pensions regulator or to the department as necessary. We've been busy also having regular meetings with the department on a weekly basis, also our colleagues in Scotland and Northern Ireland, and regular meetings also with the 4 actuarial firms as well. We continue to lobby government, particularly asking for regulations on employer flexibility, pushing for a pause in the GMP equalisation, and getting some clarity also on the 95 cap and where we are, and also on the cloud. And I think there's some information coming on that in the next few months. We've also been liaising with the regulator, important piece of work. Sometimes the regulator comes out with some information which is trustee guidance, and sometimes we just need to be subtly aware that that's also, you know, LGPS guidance as well. There's a little bit of difference to that. Ellie, if I could have the, sorry, I'm going to have the next slide and the next one as well, because I've just covered that one, I suddenly realized. Yeah, okay. We've been watching out for unintended consequences arising from various things, particularly the Department of Health and Social Care's life assurance scheme, the 60,000 grant to those who die in service catching COVID from their work. We just need to see some of the detail of that and just work through that. Also, we've had, of course, finally the Supreme Court boycotts judgment. Whilst I think that confirms very much the situation, we always knew that government can't use guidance to direct authorities. Nonetheless, the legal judgment was quite broad. So we're just doing a little bit of work to just see if there are any other aspects there that we just need to pick up, and we'll be publishing that on our website as soon as we get that. I'm very conscious about the gathering of data that we have been asking you for, and you may be a bit survey fatigued. But it is important, and those resilience, cash flow and governance surveys, all of which can be found, results of which can be found on our website, is very important. It's not just about keeping the Secretariat active and busy. It's actually important for us now on occasions like this to give that reassuring message that this scheme is coping with, it's delivering pensions, it's picking up obviously the delivery of new pensioners, it's also dealing with, sadly, with death in service issues. And that's a very important message to send to right throughout the scheme and to our observers. But it also is important information and evidence for the department to be lobbying also on our behalf to the Treasury as well. So I'm very grateful to the tremendous amount of support that you've been given. We've had over 80% replies to those surveys, which is very, very important. And they give very strong messages about the ability to continue to deliver pensions in these new circumstances. We will revisit those surveys as things change, and we plan to be sensible about actually, you know, the timescale of those. But it's important we keep an eye on employer payments, on cash flow, on any ill health stumbling blocks, and of course maintaining, of course, data quality and the delivery of the annual benefit statement as well. I would like to just say also, we are acutely aware, of course, that local government is under some financial pressure, although COVID has, of course, altered very much the dynamics of all of this. But we do, of course, as a pension sector, though we operate out of the same buildings as local administrating authorities, we have a separate funded status. And I think it's important that the local authorities recognize that. And whilst we will continue to strive always, of course, for efficiency and improved outputs, that subtle difference should never be forgotten. Our principal aim, and the aim, of course, of pensioners, is they pay in to the scheme to have a reward of a pension at the end of it, but also administered to a high quality as well. And if I can have the next slide, please. Well, this is the annual report. It's very much, I think, steady as we go. It's you will find the link there on the website, and you can follow it through in its various sections. The good news is basically that the total membership of the local government pension scheme has continued to grow by 37,000. There has been a reduction in active members. The total assets of the local government pension scheme has increased to £291 billion, nearly an increase of 6%. This is, of course, I have to hasten to add, the 31st of March last year. The assets were invested predominantly in pooled investment vehicles, 66%, public equities 17%, bonds 7%, direct property 3%, as well as the other asset classes. And you can see more drilling down of those information on the report. The local authority return on investment over the 2018-19 year was 6.6%. And this is reflective of the market conditions for the year and set against a UK return of 6.4. If you include investment income, the scheme remains in a positive cash flow position, which of course is also a very important aspect. I appreciate also, of course, that of the 89-88 funds, they will be in different positions, but this, of course, is the summary of the scheme's position. And we must never forget that, of course, we deliver and provide an income for over 1.7 million pensioners during the year. Ellie, if I can have the final slide, please. The valuation at the 31st of March 2019 showed that the liabilities for the LGPS were 296 billion, which showed an overall funding level in the scheme of 98%. That means that the deficits were down to about 6 billion in 2019, as opposed to the 37 billion in 2016. It goes without saying, of course, that with a funding level of 98% of the scheme, there were many funds who found themselves over 100% funded. And just before questions could start on whether we should need to look at our investment strategies and employers starting to challenge on their contributions, of course, events of the last few months, of course, have halted all that sort of discussion. The employer contributions broadly similar, with some degree of risk taken off the table. And of course, there's always the element of front loading that takes place that sometimes skews the figures. As a result, of course, this will always be an issue depending where the employer are and who they are. And you will know, obviously, that the profiles of employers is something we need to keep a very close watching brief on. Finally, I think the important thing to say is that with regard to investment, of course, we are long-term investors. And many would argue that now is the time, of course, to be investing in a market when it's more at the bottom. We have to sober ourselves with the fact that there will be people that will be joining the scheme in 2020 who actually won't become recipients of any pension until we get to the 2060s decade, which is a sobering thought for us all. But that is the way in which we have to look at it, is that we have this long term to deal with. Finally, can I again thank all of you for the work that you are doing, and whether you are directly or indirectly, your contribution to this scheme and towards the integrity of the governance, administration and investment of this, one of the world's largest pension schemes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roger. I think that's incredibly positive news, the kind of position of the scheme and how that's developed over the last couple of years. Just before we hand over to Rachel, I'm just going to ask you a couple of quick questions in response to your slides, and obviously we'll come back to the rest of the audience in due course. I'm just going to ask you, obviously that position has really improved over a few years. I'm interested, how's that going down with the department? Has that helped conversations?
Well, obviously, you know, we in any normal circumstances, this would be very positive news indeed. And of course, and it is positive because it shows that the investment strategies of the funds, of course, pay dividends. But of course, it has to be taken in the context of where we are now. And of course, in 12 months' time, when we published our 8th report, we will be reflecting the impact of COVID. But I think what it shows is the resilience of the scheme. This is a scheme that is, you know, the funds take due diligence about the investment of it. And again, with the surveys that we're doing, Joe, I think we can start to demonstrate to the department and to the Treasury that this is a competent scheme that is done to the highest professional standards.
Thanks, Roger. Yeah, I think that will be really important, especially as we come through this period and people begin to examine some of the financial consequences across government. The other quick question I was going to ask you is, at the last Scheme Advisory Board, we spent a little bit of time thinking about some of the other elements of the work programme, including the Good Governance project. Just if you could give us a little bit of an update on some of those areas too, that'd be great.
Yes, well, obviously, we recognise that these are difficult situations that we're in. So we've taken a view that that obviously there's some COVID activity that we need to prioritise, the survey work that needs to be done. The Good Governance project, we've put that on hold at the moment. We're doing some background work on that, but obviously we think that it makes sense that we need to settle down and get to a sort of a calmer waters before we start to go further with that. And similarly with the Pension Board survey as well that was due out, we've decided that we will put that on pause as well. We anticipate still issuing some advice on responsible investment, and obviously the work on cost transparency continues. We are anticipating that government will make an announcement on the 95k cap in the next couple of months. And we're also, of course, awaiting the consultation on the McLeod rectification. Unfortunately, although we don't require government legislation, because obviously we are different in the LGPS to the rest of the public sector schemes, nonetheless, we have to follow behind Her Majesty's Treasury. So the Treasury will probably lead on their consultation first, and then we will follow. We will be separate, but obviously we know our place when you deal with Her Majesty's Treasury. So I think that's an update of where we are.
Thanks very much, Roger. And I'm hoping it will be helpful for us all to have a Treasury head of the Treasury who actually knows a little bit about the LGPS as well. Rachel, you've been doing lots of work with our local authority committee and also the practitioner forum from the Scheme Advisory Board. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you've been up to?
Thank you, Joe. Yes, and morning, everybody. Perhaps not the forum that we expected to meet in, or perhaps not the one we would most enjoy to meet in, but nevertheless, it's great to have the opportunity to share with you this morning a little bit of the work of the practitioners COVID-19 group. And just a word of warning, first of all, I would never claim to be the holy grail of all the answers, but I have had the opportunity over the last 8 to 10 weeks to meet and talk with a number of you about a number of practitioners about some of the challenges and themes that are starting to merge very much at ground level across the fund. So very, very welcome the opportunity this morning to share that with you. It was great really to hear early on that there was recognition from the board that there were really wide-ranging implications across all aspects of delivery of LGPS funds, whether that be the investments, whether that be changes to communication channels and themes, how the operations side's working, particularly with regards to payment of benefits and calculating new benefits, and the day-to-day stuff that probably none of us really think about as much as we should do, which is the practicalities of getting information and like nomination forms and death certificates and medical certifications back and forth, which we predominantly relied on traditional sort of postal methods for. So the practitioners group has met a few times. We've been very, very conscious of the fact that it is an evolving picture. I'm very keen to draw on experience from, if you like, across the coalface, recognising that we'll all be experiencing probably slightly different things at slightly different times, depending on our membership, employer base, and sort of how things are moving around us. And the group has been a really good sounding board for socialising some of the issues, informing some of the surveys and reviewing the outcome. And I'll share with you if that's okay. First of all, just a couple of things that have come up that have been, as Roger referred to, escalated up to our colleagues at MHCLG and also the pensions regulator, and also some of the themes of the surveys that have come out, which we've focused on. So in terms of some of the things that have come up, so we were aware early on of some issues in the early days around possibly processing ill health benefits and getting information from medical practitioners. And with the support of Lorraine and the LGA team, we were able to escalate those and get some guidance out to those practitioners fairly early on. We've also been aware that there are concerns around transfer values, and guidance issued more generally by the pensions regulator has put all of us, quite rightly, on, unfortunately, alert for increase in pension scam activity. So getting some more specific guidance as it applies to public sector funds and the LGPS is something that we've been asking the pensions regulator for. And I was thrilled to hear in these sessions earlier in the week that Nick Gannon said that there is going to be a public sector LGPS specific part of the regulator's communications dedicated to guidance for us. So that's been really positive. I think two other areas I'd draw out, year end, we're obviously in our normal year end process, but approaching this with a great deal of uncertainty around the information employers will be able to provide, and also how they are impacted financially, which may impact both timing and availability of contributions to the scheme, subsequently having an impact on accounts and benefits. We've been able to raise those issues with colleagues at CLG, and in particular concerns around the delays in response to consultation around deferred employers and possible alternatives to look at exit mechanisms as well. I'm very pleased to be able to say that this is something that has been and is being looked at now, recognising the importance and perhaps urgency around it in the current context. So just touching very briefly on the surveys, and hopefully you've all had a chance to have a look at the 3 surveys and the summary results which have been posted on the Scheme Advisory Board website. A huge thank you to the LGA team, because I know you've been working hard to get these out, analyse the responses, and also post the information in the public forum as quickly as possible to help support and inform people. So the resilience survey, again, was created fairly early on and gave a very positive picture and confidence around funds being able to perform the core functions that the pensions regulator and PASA have come out we really should be focusing on. In the immediate term, payment of pensions, there are no flags there, which is great. There is an ongoing dialogue with employers, as I've referred to, and on the whole, the cash flow position, where there are issues, there is an awareness, and there is a pocket of those rather than anything more material across the scheme. The results of the governance survey have been posted this morning, so if you've not seen them, they are now live on the website. And again, some really positive messages coming back on that. It's great to see that with regards to decision making, which I know has been a concern, and we've all had to move quite quickly to perhaps look at our processes. There are either delegations or urgent decision processes in place, including dialogue with members of pensions committees or governing bodies as appropriate. There is an evolving use and protocol and learnings around use of virtual meetings. I think if you'd have told us 3 months ago we'd be using technology in this way and quite so much on a day-to-day basis, I don't think we'd have believed you, but there's been a huge effort to transform, and we'll continue to learn and improve how we use the new technology and kit that's available to us. We've also, I guess more generally, I'd just say there's an awful lot to be proud about in terms of those results. We have seen unprecedented change in operational practices over the last 8 to 10 weeks. And that should give us, and I hope does give all of you, a real confidence in terms of our ability to continue to change on an operational side going forward. Lots to continue to keep an eye out for, but I'll leave it there and wait for Q&A.
Thank you very much, Rachel. My neighbour has started cutting down the hedge, so hopefully the noise won't come through too loudly to everybody. But one of the benefits of these new virtual meetings. So we've had a couple of questions come through. I'm going to come to you both with them shortly. So one in particular, an area that we've spent some time looking at in the past, and kind of a reoccurring theme, question of resourcing and administration and some of the challenges, and how this situation might do a combination of heighten the pressure on existing resource, but also maybe put a crunch on resource going forward. Rachel, I'll start with you, and then I'll come to Roger for thoughts on how you think that situation might evolve.
No, certainly. I mean, recruitment and resourcing is something that's definitely been flagged through the practitioners group. I mean, a number of funds have got active or have had active recruitment programs ongoing, and some of those have naturally been disrupted by this process. But unlike like many authorities, they're starting to restart again. And the provision, as LGE has, of the online training facilities will really help in terms of supporting those who are bringing new people into the organisation, to help them orientate and learn the basics around the scheme, to support them in terms of getting up to speed with their day-to-day duties, particularly in pensions administration. Longer term, I think there's still challenges that will remain, and mentioned earlier about the good governance review. I think one of the comments I've heard is, you know, and I'm sure many of you have, that, you know, there's a huge amount that we will learn from this exercise, and never waste a crisis. I think it's one comment that's been made, and it's absolutely, whilst that from the board's perspective, work is still ongoing on that, but the dialogue with some of the key stakeholders has had to be deferred, and it will be really valuable, I think, to come back to that in a few months' time, when there is the capacity and there is the learnings and experience from recent events to really inform dialogue on how that moves forward.
Thanks, Rachel. Roger, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I don't know quite what I did say during the speech, but I've had a message from Bob Holloway to say that the Good Governance project isn't entirely on hold. We have high emphasis to continue to do some work in the background, but and as Rachel said, when we think it's appropriate time to bring it forward, we will do that. I mean, there is always a concern, of course, about the corporate memory, about the experience of your pensions team, and you will note I subtly did make reference to the fact that, you know, we have a separate funding arrangement for our staff and for our teams, which is different from the administering authority. And hopefully there was a coded message there that says that, you know, because of that separated status to the rest of the administering authority, that means that you have your first job is to ensure the maintenance of high standards of delivery and knowledge and capabilities within that team. And I hope that giving that message will help with that.
Thanks, Roger. Got quite a big question come through, which is partly, I suppose, linked to the quote that Rachel made about never wasting a crisis, and maybe it coming from the other end of the telescope, from the kind of government end. Do you think there's any likelihood of sort of re-emergence of ideas of more merging of funds, or changing pooling structures, or forming new forms of shared service arrangements coming out of this process?
Well, I think obviously, you know, one always has to be vigilant to any things that government or people around government are coming up with. And certainly at this moment in time, obviously, the minister's not been actively engaged, because obviously there are other higher prioritisation issues. I think that's one of the important issues of the surveys that we're doing at the moment. They start to, you know, they're starting to show the good practice, the good delivery that is being done now. And there's no doubt that there is some momentum, of course, coming from within the various funds for some mergers and cross cooperation. And pooling, of course, has brought together the sharing of best practice better than ever. So, I mean, you know, we will never be a status quo organizational scheme, but then that's true of any good organization. You should always be moving with the times, with new technology, and recognizing the trends. And I go back to the surveys. You know, this is strong evidence base, and those people who will have ideas and themes and all the rest of it, you know, now that we have an annual report, and now we have 7 annual reports where we're building up and compiling that information, we are in a far better position to not only defend the status quo, but to make an evidence base for where we step forward when and if it's necessary.
Thank you, Roger. Anything you want to add, Rachel?
yeah, I should say, in terms of the comments about crisis, I think just to follow on from Roger, that what the surveys show is that we in terms of pension fund administration are not in a crisis. We are managing extremely well. We have responded very, very quickly, made some really quite significant changes to how we work. And one of the other things that comes through in the governance survey is there's a question around risk registers, and there's a really sort of strong response to that. It shows that people are proactively looking at how they've responded to this, what they need to do next, things to look out for, whether it will be cash flow, resourcing, and proactively managing some of those things that are coming through. I mean, the point around costs, I mean, there will be undoubtedly some potential additional costs coming through for responding to this change, whether that be in terms of ensuring that certain developments are brought forward so we can increase capacity perhaps, and free up some resourcing, or whether it ensure we do extra communications to our key stakeholders and our members to ensure that we keep them informed throughout this. So there is an awful lot of positives. And something that we've been looking at from a practitioner point of view is the processing statistics on deaths. And apologies to be slightly morbid for a minute, but there's a huge amount that's reported every day through the daily updates on how those statistics are going. And we did collate from a handful of funds evidence which suggested there'd been a spike. However, in the last couple of weeks, we've also seen that come back down, and we're looking to, as part of a future survey, and when we run and relook again at the resilience survey, to get a wider picture of that, so that short term we can have some confidence that we can monitor and from an operational perspective respond if needed. But again, an alarm has sort of gone away on that one, and possibly start to think about some of the longer term trends on, is there going to be a one-off shock to our membership and our liabilities, which could have longer term funding implications. So there's a dialogue starting to emerge, but they're longer term issues which we don't need immediate reaction to and can take time to consider.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Can I ask a sort of follow-up question on kind of lived experience that the practitioner group might be hearing about, whether there are particular changes in member and saver behaviour that are kind of emerging across funds, and also maybe just as a part of a follow-up to that, are there particular day-to-day changes that people are finding more difficult, or actually so much easier than they thought? Actually, why didn't we change this process many years ago, and now the future looks rosy?
Yes, I'll probably just anecdotally take the last comment. I think there is always a nervousness around change and changing processes, and throughout this there have been some things that have forced change. So we've had to move to accepting more electronic working, more electronic communication, and sharing forms and information with members, and it's okay. And in some instances, it's actually speeded things up and made the whole process a lot quicker. So there is, as I say, a confidence building about both our abilities, I think, to change and adapt. And I can see there being more to do in that space, and less concern really about taking these things on.
Thank you. Roger, we had a question come through about how the Scheme Advisory Board is kind of working day to day during this kind of COVID situation. How are the meetings happening? Are they meeting as frequently? And I think also one of the things that came up at the last board meeting was how closely the England and Wales SAB is working with some of the other regions. So just wondering if you could touch on that a little bit.
Yes, thank you, Joe. As I indicated in my presentation, there's a lot of work going on, and this goes back to the very strong and good communications that we have, particularly with DHCLG, highly appropriate relationships, of course. But I've worked in local government for nearly 25 years as an elected member, and I know nowhere else where we have that sensible liaison that goes on. And that has been, that has proved to be valuable, particularly at this particular exercise now. As I say, weekly meetings with DHCLG staff, also with Scotland and Northern Ireland as well, because obviously there needs to be some element of consistency as well. So, I mean, that to me is very important. The team are obviously all operating and working from home as well, and you will know on the website, it says very clearly that if you have any questions, you can put them through to Rachel's group. But also that, Jeff and the team are there also to help at the same time. So I think, very positive. And it's at times, as Rachel says, when the rest of the world is in crisis and we have to adapt, it proves the very strong relationships and mechanisms that we have in place, that at a time like this, it still works. And I think that to me is a great boost.
Thank you very much, Roger. Come back to a question of sort of link to reaction and governance. I guess this is really the first big crisis that we've faced in the scheme since the pooling arrangements have been in place. And interested whether there's sort of areas that kind of experience that you want to kind of share from how that's been in a slightly different situation than we were when we had the 2008 crisis. There's a different dynamic. What's that felt like on the ground, Rachel?
So I think, I would have to first confess that my history with the LGPS isn't long enough to necessarily comment. But in terms of recent years, there's been some, not just because of this, but on an ongoing day-to-day basis, there is now much closer dialogue, I believe, between funds and fund officers, sharing of information and ideas, and the pools and the organisations that have been set up to help us implement our investment strategy have built a new depth of expertise, resilience, resource to help us and assist us with the challenges that there understandably are at this time in sort of looking at the markets, looking at the investment ideas and informing how we move forward from here. So we have built a resilience, and we have built, as Roger said, a much broader and better ongoing dialogue, which means we can share ideas, we can move quickly, capitalise on best practice, and very much make sure that we build more resilience than we ever have before.
Thank you. Roger?
Yeah, I think to be quite clear, I think the issue of pooling has reached a different stage now. I think when pooling came in, because of the speed that it was done, perhaps the manner of the way it came in, I think a lot of funds thought that they were sort of done to and lost sovereignty and all the rest of it. But that's not the case. I mean, the money still belongs to the funds, the investment strategy still belongs to the funds. And the funds own the pools, and the pools are subservient to their member funds. So I think there's been a slight sort of balance again of that. And I would like to think that during this particular national crisis that we're having, we can start to see that balance sort of getting its proper equilibrium as well. As to whether, I think one of the questions I saw in the chat as to whether this will spur government on to alter, as I said before, I think, it is for us as funds and as a scheme to be, very much shape our own destiny and shape those good practices to go forward and keep delivering the goods. 1.7 million pensioners receive a pension well administered. Members get information on an annual basis. It's properly administered funds. These are the things we need to be hammering home to governments and to our members and to our employers about the confidence that this scheme has.
Thanks, Roger. I think that is a really good message, and I think one of the things that we've seen hold up throughout this process from surveys from the Scheme Advisory Board, our own surveys, is the resilience and the success of schemes in continuing to deliver member benefits and do the things that people expect. Just as we kind of begin to get towards the end of time, and if anybody's got any final questions, please push them through. I'm going to just ask you, obviously it's been an incredibly busy couple of months. It's probably going to be busy for a while yet. We might have some disruption to continue for some while, kind of wider economy, etc. You know, what's sort of top of your to-do list, and how where are the things you think actually, you know, once I get over this kind of initial really gritty period, what would I like to get back to doing, or what might change? And I'll ask Rachel to start, maybe from the practitioner end.
So can I answer it in two parts, Joe, if that's okay? In terms of what's on top of the inbox today, I mean, it would be amiss of me not to mention, with it being Mental Health Awareness Week, you know, we've spent a lot of time in the last few weeks thinking about our external stakeholders once we got over the initial, you know, how do we get people working from home? We are in this new world for the long haul, regardless of whether workplace is open or not. So, you know, there will be a new normal, and I think that's generally accepted, but we need to sort of ensure that we continue to support our teams through the changes. We add support to them, that we help them recognise that they are playing an absolutely crucial role in supporting and delivering the benefits for nearly 6 million people across the scheme, and that's something they should be incredibly proud for. So keeping people working together, motivated, supported in their role, enabling them through further, particularly on the admin side, making sure we're nimble to change, accelerating changes which can build capacity, making sure we've got good resources and systems in place, which things like the follow on to some of the Academy's work around some of the developments there will certainly help. And administration has been for a long time perhaps left to just get on. We're going to have to see a step change in that, not least with things like the dashboard coming as well. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to, yes, we need to continue to get the big strategic funding and investment issues resolved, but let's sort out some of the long-term administration system solutions as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think Rachel has very much summarised all the administration issues. I think on the funding side, of course, we will have to recognise, of course, the very different international financial situation that we're in and what that means to investment, to cash flows. Of course, we're going to see a situation where companies are not going to be paying dividends, or the size of dividends that we'd had anticipated. So we'll have that. And we'll get back, of course, to the continual issues of responsible investment, which was an issue, will be an issue, and how has this crisis affected that? And then there's the small matter of things like the McLeod and the rectification of that's got to be dealt with. So when we know we're back onto McLeod and some of those other things, we know that the normal work has been resumed.
What a happy thought, in so many ways. Thank you both very much. I think we're coming to the end of time. I'm going to hand over to, and thank you very much for all your questions. I'm going to hand over to Rachel to guide us, Rachel P, to guide us towards the conclusion.
Thank you. Thanks for that. That is all we have time for today, unfortunately. We've all enjoyed our LA Live webinar series this week, and we examined regulation, employers, ESG, administration, and of course ended with today's session focused on the annual report and practitioners. And many thanks to Rachel, Roger, and Joe for their time today. And thanks to all of you who are watching. We hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.